Welcome to the very first episode of Broken But Better podcast. I am your lovely host, Mariah, and I am super excited for you to be here. I can't express the amount of love and support that I have received, and I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to everyone who reached out, who supported, who subscribed, who double tapped. I hope I didn't forget anybody, but I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm super excited to take this journey with you. I pray that you see God through my experiences. You hear God's voice through this podcast. I think a lot of times in life we think that we're doing it by ourselves, but in actuality, we share so many similarities. And I pray that through my experiences, you get breakthroughs, you get freedom. You get your faith is expanded, knowledge is released, all truth is exposed. And I just can't wait. I don't even have words, but I have words at the same time. So I'm just super excited you're here. Before we really get started, I do want to shout out my nephews, TJ and Tyler. My nephew made it very clear that I need to shout him out. So I'm going to shout him out at the very beginning of this podcast because I know they're not going to sit and watch the entire thing. So shout out to TJ and Tyler. Moi, love you. But no, let's get into the first episode. And I want to title this episode, Who Are You? Because a lot of you may have seen this flyer or just my post that I've been making and you're like, girl, who are you? And I just want to kind of give you a little backstory. Now, you're not going to get all of it in this first episode. You got to stay tuned. You got to keep watching. You have to subscribe because we're going to talk about some really tough topics that I've been through, but we're also going to talk about the joy on the other side of that. We're going to laugh, we're going to cry some. Hopefully I'm not on here crying, but you get the gist. So the very first episode of Who Are You? And I want to take you back to 2019. And in 2019, my perspective of life truly changed. And it changed for the good. And I think 2019 was a very tough year for me because I didn't know who I was. And I remember in 2019, always constantly asking myself the question of who are you? Or I would hear this voice of who are you? And I didn't really know the answer. But I thought I could buy the answer, if that makes sense. I thought that I could throw myself into things and I could buy the answer. But I also at that very time was suffering depression. And in prior years, I had suffered from depression. But in 2019, it was like, I'm tired. I don't think I have a fight in me to keep fighting. My depression got so bad to the point that I couldn't even tell you what day of the week it was. If I was to walk outside, I couldn't tell you whether it was raining, whether it was snowing. I really felt like I never looked up because that's how much in bondage of depression I was. So when the question kept coming up of who are you, I thought I could just go buy it and find it, to be honest. I would just do things. It got to the point that I had a script rehearsed because I was so afraid that people was going to ask me who I was or what is my purpose. And my script was really accolades. It was not like, hey, I'm a great person and X, Y, and Z. It was like, no, I graduated college. I work in corporate America. I work in a very high position in corporate America at a young age. It was my accolades that I could display and not necessarily character or me finding my true purpose in life that brought me happiness and fulfillment. Because believe me, I hated getting up going to work. I wanted to lay in the bed all day. Going to work did not bring satisfaction, but getting accomplishments did. And if you're somebody who if you ever deal with accomplishments, you understand that it's not an everyday thing. You don't make accomplishments. You can force accomplishments to come, but me getting promoted wasn't an everyday thing. But I was striving monthly for something new to happen in my life. And I think I did a really good job of hiding my depression because for so long I lived by myself that no one knew that I was depressed. I was that dress it up and make it real for you. I could dress it up real well. And a lot of people who know me at that time or knew me at that time, if I was to tell them this story now, they'll be like, no, you weren't. You weren't depressed. You were the most happiest, nice person that we could meet. But baby, I was hurting inside. So throughout that whole 2019, I just was throwing myself into things, trying to find purpose. All right, I'm gonna go to grad school. And I was I'm really good at school. I'm just gonna go back to school and get an education and boom, that's another accomplishment. I'm gonna strive to get a promotion at work. I'm gonna strive to start a business. I was throwing myself into things. And surprisingly, I was able to accomplish those things within that year, but I still wasn't happy. Like, I would get a promotion and then the next day I'm like, all right, what's next? Because that did not equate to happiness, but I thought it would. Or let me go buy something, the latest purse, and that's going to make me happy. Let me go buy a new car. Like, I was searching for purpose and my reasoning for living in all the wrong things. Fast forward to 2020, I'm like, all right, this is going to be my breakout year. Like, this is a year where I have, like, I'm going to do it. Like, I think everybody thought that 2020 was their year. It was going to be their breakout year. And then boom, here comes the pandemic. But right before the pandemic, like, this is how unaware I was of what was going on in life. I literally quit my job maybe like 2 days before the world shut down, and they was like, we send everybody home, because I had no idea that the pandemic was even like, I wasn't paying attention. And I quit my job, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go get a new job. I'm educated, I know a lot, I got a lot of experience for such a young age. Like, this is gonna be easy. Because one thing about Mariah, if she don't like it, she was out. Like, if I didn't like a job, they wasn't treating me right, they wasn't paying me right, oh baby, I was out. So in my mind, I could do it because I've done it before. So I quit my job. Then the pandemic happens. So I'm like, nobody calling me back. No jobs are calling me back. What do I do? And here come that voice again. Who are you? What is your purpose? And now I'm frustrated because I thought this was going to be my year. And I thought that, like, you know, I was going to hit the ground running, and I silenced that voice because I accomplished so many things. And in that year was when I really was like, it was almost like, I don't know. It was like a sigh of relief that I was able to say, I don't know. That was the first time I was honest with myself, like a whole 365 days before. I couldn't be honest to say I don't know, but that was the very first time I was like, I don't know. And I feel like that's when I hit a wall when people say, I have nothing else to do but to turn to God. Like, I had no other pinpoint. The world was shut down. I couldn't go buy anything. Buy something for what? We in the house. I couldn't go get another job. Nobody was calling me. Grad school, like, what am I sitting in school for if I can't use this degree? Like, it was just, nothing was making sense anymore. And I was just feel like I was at my wit's end. Like, I couldn't control the narrative. I couldn't control the situation. I literally had no other option but to turn to God. And I've always been a person who prayed or went to church, but I had a really surface level relationship with God. Like, there was no level of intimacy with God. I found out in that time, like, I really didn't even know who God was. I didn't know what he sounded like. I didn't know what he looked like. I didn't know what he could do. Like, it was so surface level. Everything was done out of routine. So in that year, the voice just got louder. And like I said, all I could do was turn to God, and I asked God, like, who am I? That was the first time I was just like, okay, I'm going to talk back to God and expect a response. Because before, I would just pray and then get up and go about my day. I would never sit there and listen and see if he was going to respond back to me. But that was the first time that I was like, I don't know who I am, so who am I then? Because then I began to realize, like, this is not my voice asking me who I am. Because I'm tired of hearing that question of who you are, and I don't have a response. What I learned was it was God's voice truly talking to me of saying, who are you? What is your purpose? He was asking me that question as if I had an answer. But what I realized is he was just trying to get my attention. That was my invitation to Christ, to be like, all right, God. That was my first invitation. That wasn't even my, like, I'm going to do this thing called life with you. That was just like my first invitation, because I really didn't know all the depth of God. And in 2020, I just feel like God gave me the space to just be. I no longer had to pretend. I no longer had to put on makeup or clothes or have the latest and pretend. It was the first time that I could just be ugly. And I'm talking about not an outer appearance ugly, but like the inside of, like, just the ugliness of, like, I didn't know who I was. The lost part of me, the depressed part of me, like, I no longer had to fight. it was just like, just be. It was the first time where I truly found stillness in the fact of doing nothing, because I couldn't do anything. Like I no longer had control to do anything. Like the world was shut down. I couldn't, no jobs were calling me. I just, it was nothing. What we doing? We all on the internet watching somebody on live. Like there was nothing else for me to do. And a lot of times I think in that moment I looked at social media at times and was like, but everybody coming out with a business, I'm going to come out with a business. So I would like start it and I could never complete it. It was like God would not allow me to complete anything in that year. It was more like, you can't run this time. You have nowhere to go but to be with me. And in that year, a lot of times people like 2020 probably could have been the worst year of their life. And I mean, just from my like family dynamic, it could have been the worst year as well, because I lost my grandmother in that year. And she was like the core of our family. And for me, it was the best year because it was like I seen God in a way that I had never seen him before. Like I really seen who God was. And I remember I didn't have many words to pray that year, but I remember the one prayer that I prayed, and I think I like found it on Twitter at the time, and I probably still have it in my phone, but it was a screenshot, and the prayer simply said like, God, overwhelm me with your presence. And that's the only prayer I could pray for the entire year. What I did realize though, that the question of who I was no longer became a question. I didn't hear that question anymore. I just was like, God, overwhelm me with your presence. Like overwhelm me to the point where I feel your presence. And I really didn't know even what that meant, but I was open because I didn't have another option. A lot of people may face depression in that year because of the pandemic, but that was probably the first year I felt like I could breathe. That was the first year where I really didn't feel like I was in darkness anymore. Like I was really soaking in day by day. Partially because we didn't have no other choice. Like I had no other choice. I feel like my eyes were just open and I was seeing things that I never had paid attention to before, because I was always on the go. Like I was always trying to find purpose. I was always trying to do things to fulfill a void or to not be in depression. Like I was always on the go. Like, all right, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. And nothing was bringing me fulfillment. But in that year, it was just like, okay, you get your breath back. Breathe. And I felt like I truly start to see God through people too. Like I was able to sit back and be like, oh, that can't be nothing but God. This whole pandemic, this whole shutdown, this is a God thing. This isn't a government thing. This isn't just a virus that has shut us down. But oh God, you working, you doing something that I ain't never seen done before. And a lot of times I had to equate it like, has this happened before? And people be like, yeah, back in the old days. But I had never experienced just a stillness of God where I was just able to breathe and I didn't have to pretend for nobody. And I truly began to see the presence of God. I didn't have a deep relationship still because I wasn't being fed the right things still, but it was almost like, you're safe here. I'm not expecting anything of you in this moment. One thing I can say, I think that I've realized about God is God's a gentleman. He's not going to bombard your space and make you be with him. I asked for his presence. I asked, so who am I? I didn't get a response then, but what I did get a response was he gave me his presence in return. It was like God knew I had been beat up by the world and beat up by experiences, that he wasn't about to beat me up into being like, you need to know who I am and you need to know all the things that I could do for you. It was just like, I'm giving you a space to be. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. Like that was nothing compared to what happens in the following years. So I say all of that to say, like, God will knock on our heart, but it's up to us to let him in. He's not going to break down the door to be like, Mariah, you got to let me in. But what he'll do is just keep knocking. And what he was doing was keep knocking with that question about like, who are you? Who are you? What is your purpose? And I became frustrated with the question that I'm like, why am I asking myself this question? But I really didn't know it was God asking me the question the entire time. And I was put in multiple situations to keep like trying to find the answer until I had no other choice. Like he was my last resort. And I think that's one of the good things about God is he doesn't treat us how we treat him. Like God doesn't make us a last resort, even though we make him a last resort. Like I'm able to see now how bad I mishandled God. Like I really treated him like a genie. All right, boom, I'm gonna pray and I expect to see something to happen. But what I didn't realize was I was praying and then making it happen out of my own ability, and I was always falling short. What I was doing was, now that I think about it, I never really prayed for God to heal my depression at that time. I just thought it was normal. I thought that everybody go through it. I thought that it was just something that'll pass. That's how much I didn't know who God was, that he could really heal me from depression or anxiety or my mind torments. Like that's how bad of, that's just the relation. I didn't have that depth of a relationship with him. So 2020 went through, and like I say, it was probably one of the time that I smiled the most, but probably the time where I shouldn't have been because of we in a pandemic. I don't have a job. My grandmother just passed. My sister has asked to move back in with me because of, the schools are shut down. Like that should have been the year I probably should have lost my mind. Like a lot of people didn't make it out of the pandemic because of the loneliness and all of those different things that by the grace of God, I made it through. After 2020 happened, I'm like, okay, boom, we back at it. I'm starting back working, and it's almost if like I put God back down again. Like you got me through 2020. Now I'm going back at it. Like I'm back at it, back to my old ways. I'm no longer depressed. I feel a little happy and all of these good things. And I'm back to doing what I'm doing. Like the question of who you are still has not come back up. And now that I'm in 2021, like it hasn't come back up. I think I got my momentum back. I got some strength back. The world is opening back up. We about to be outside. No. We not back outside. I wasn't back outside. That's when I felt like God was like, all right now, I let you have your time. I let you catch your breath. Now you either gonna do life with me or you're gonna be 1 foot in and 1 foot out. But you can't have both. And I remember in 2021, I was probably like, this is when I even started smoking. Like, I think in 2020 is when I picked up smoking very heavily because I was just looking for an escape. No, I'm going to say 2019. I picked up smoking very heavily because I was looking for an escape. And it was like 2021. And I remember, I don't even remember what I was doing, but I was watching a video. I was watching a sermon, and I remember the pastor saying, if you don't give your life over to God now, you're going to be begging for him in the next year to help you. And that scared the mess out of me because it made me feel like, my life can get worse. So you're telling me my life is not all that good. Like it's decent. I'm able to manage it. And I think I'm able to manage it. So you mean to tell me it could get worse? Okay, Mariah. In that moment, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this thing called life with you, God. Like, I'm going to devote myself to you. I don't know what that's going to look like. I'm a little scared, but okay. I know in that moment, life started to look real different. Life started to like change. It was almost if like I could see again. It was, I started to see people for who they truly were. I started to lose things that didn't hold value, that maybe I bought in one season that I thought was so valuable to make me happy that I lost. Like it was just almost if like I was being stripped of Mariah. I became so unrecognizable over those next couple of months because I really was like, okay, God, where do I even start? Like, where do I even start to get to know you? And what I realized is I was so busy trying to figure out who I was that I really didn't know who God was. And I just want to tell that to anybody who's like, I really know who I am. And I think that's good if you feel like you know who you are now. But I would challenge you to say, do you really know who God is? Because we are a reflection and a mirror of him, that if we don't know who he is, we truly don't know who we are. And if I never correlated the two. I never correlated me knowing who God was and then knowing my purpose or knowing who I am. I never put those two together, ever. It's almost like you buy your iPhone. You really don't know all the details in your iPhone until you go to the about part of your phone or you read the manual. You just have it and you're like figuring it out as you go. We're not sitting there reading the instructions of all the details that come with our iPhone. It's so bad to the point that when iPhone release a new update, we go into YouTube to watch like a 2 or 14-minute clip about what the new features are, but we haven't really found them out for ourselves or went to the manufacturer for ourselves. And I had to look at my life like that. Like, I'm just figuring it out as I go instead of going to the person who created me. He could tell me way more about who I am than I could. But in order for me to do that, I had to know who he was. And I didn't know. And in 2020, I got to see his presence, him hovering over me or brooding over me. But in 2021, I got to know who he was. I got to see him as a deliverer. I got to see him as a protector. I got to see him as a provider. And it opened my eyes to be like, oh, this is who you are. I was just praying just prayers just to be praying them. I was just going to church just to get a feel good. Like, I was going to church to get a feel good. Like, almost as if I was going to get a high and then I didn't know how to do life Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Like, I was doing it out of my own will and my own flesh. Like, I did not know this is who you truly were. I classified you as just a church, but not a person. And it made me do a lot of things. It made me really feel like I have treated God so wrong. And it made me see how much he loves me, to the fact that he didn't treat me how I treated him. Like, he doesn't treat us how we treat people. People disappoint you. People will hurt you. People will do all of these things. And sometimes we do it to ourselves and we don't even realize it. But God was so patient enough. I think about even before 2019, how I was just living my life reckless and careless. And I really thought everything that I was doing, oh, you're such a good person, or I thought that was enough. But when I truly figured out who God was, it was almost like I was a kid all over again. And looking at my father and was like, oh God, you good. Like, you're my father and you really been taking care of me. And I haven't been taking care of you, or I haven't been seeking after you in the way I should. Like, a lot of times people think that like your life is changing. Like, just in general, somebody say, I'm going to give my life over to Christ. And you thinking that your life going to change in just the natural, like what you see around you, is really a mind thing. Like, your mind and your heart has to change first before your outside change. And for somebody who suffered from depression and anxiety, like, I was trapped in my mind. And it made me be like, the devil really be lying to us. So many lies I had to unlearn. So many things I had to come to truth about who God is, and then be like, how do I now apply this? Because at some point, I feel like at the beginning of 2021, I was using God like, I got it now. I don't need you anymore. And then I ran back into that brick wall of like, nah, you thought you could do it. Nah, you thought you had it. It's almost like you took one step forward and then 2 steps back. Like, I always felt like that. Like, and it was just, God was like, you either going to be in or you're going to be out. I'm no longer allowing you to keep playing this game with me. And I think God is so gracious that he gives us chance after chance after chance. But I think at that point, God was probably tired of me. Like, I'm tired of giving you chances. And I'm skipping around some steps only because we're going to talk about that in later episodes, of just like, it wasn't easy to truly like get rid of Mariah. Like, it was times I cried. It was times where depression did seep back up. It was times where I couldn't beat addictions that I had, or I felt like I was bound in relationships. Like, it was times where I just felt like I couldn't get out of certain things because I was battling me. It was like me and then God. It was like I was battling, like, but I want this, but God, like, you can't have that and have me. And it took me time to be understood, to like not want those things and truly desire God, because it didn't sound right. It didn't look okay. Like, it didn't look like me. And I'm like, but I'm not truly being me. But I didn't know who me was to even be like, this not me. Like, I was fighting God for somebody that I didn't even know. And it was a wrestle with my spirit of like, you got to let this person go. And when I say person, you got to let that old you go in order enough to truly find out who you are. But I think we struggle with that a lot of times because we are fighting ourselves. Like, it's like your flesh fighting your spirit. And the ultimate goal is for your spirit to win, but your flesh has become strong because of sin, because of the world, that you really got to fight off a lot of things that you didn't even know you had to fight off. So I say all of that to say, like, it wasn't easy to get to this point. It hasn't always been easy. But I truly believe that God was his grace, his mercy, his just, one thing I did learn was like, God was so patient with me still. He was so patient to be like, I know, I'm not saying that you're going to get it right, but I'm patient enough to wait on you to get it right. And I think a lot of times people think when you give your life to God, he's going to take everything away. No. It was slowly. He knew what I could deal with and what battles I was strong enough to fight each day. He knew how weak I was. He knew how strong I was. They'd be like, all right, I need you to get rid of this. I'm not telling you to I know you're still doing that, but I need you to get rid of this first. I need you to get rid of smoking. I'm going to use that as my example. And then I didn't get rid of it right away. He was patient enough to me, like, I'm going to walk you through this. And then after I truly released it, now what, God? Like, I also had to unlearn that mindset of like God was going to, somebody who always sought after accomplishments, it was almost like I would get it and then on to the next. And I thought that that's how my relationship with God was as well. That like, if I get over this hurdle, all right, God, what's next? And God didn't do me like that. God gave me the space to be like, I know I removed this from you. I'm going to give you the space to feel how it felt to get over that. I'm going to give you the space to be like, you just got out of this relationship. I'm not needing you to go on and figure out the next thing that we need to get through. Because you think this is a we thing. You think that it is you helping me fight your battles. It's not. And it's not that. You think I need your help to fight a battle, and I don't. But what I do need is your obedience. What I do need is just you to say yes. What I do need is for you to release control. That was probably one of my hardest battles, is releasing control, and that I still suffer with today. Like, I got to let God be God. I can't have faith and then be like, okay, now let me figure out how to accomplish it. Like, no, I didn't ask you to do that. I just asked you to have faith to believe that whatever I send you through, you're going to overcome it. I need you to have faith to believe that if you give me your yes, I'm going to show you how to do everything else. But I had to learn that behavior. I had to unlearn some things because I was doing everything out of my own will. If I needed something, I was making it happen. If I wanted something, I was going to get it. I never consulted with God to be like, do you want this for me? And if so, how are you going to do it? It's always was like, okay, God, I want this. Now I'm going to go figure out how to do it. We can't, at that point, I'm praying empty prayers. I didn't know who God was to be like, oh, God didn't need me to go help him do anything. And in my journey, I felt like that a lot of times I could have been out of something quicker had I realized God didn't need me to do a lot of things. He just need me to say yes to him. And I think a lot of times we get caught up in doing, like, God was going to handle the battle. All he needed me to do was be in his presence. And being in his presence for me was getting into my word, getting back into church, serving, and praying. Like, He needed my attention to be on him, not the thing he was taking away from me. And I thought it was, all right, God, you taking this away from me, I'm going to do it. Boom, easy, right? What's next? If I didn't learn nothing else, what I learned was God don't need my help. He didn't need my help. I had to unlearn that mentality of like, on to the next. Check, on to the next. Because now I'm rushing God to help me. I'm rushing God to fix me. And I'm not really learning the lesson. Like, God doesn't operate how you operate, Mariah. That's why you in this situation now. And it made me think of like the story of Moses delivering the children of Israel. Like, they were not supposed to be in bondage but because they were so busy trying to do things out of their own strength, it caused them to be on the journey longer than needed. And I know for a fact, I was on the journey. I trust in God's timing, so I know his timing is perfect. But certain things that should have gotten over, or certain things that I should have waited on God, caused me to be in a journey or in a wilderness or in isolation longer than I needed to, because I was so busy trying to do things based off my own knowledge. The Bible tells us his thoughts are not your thoughts and his ways are not your ways. And I say that to people of like waiting on God to tell you what's next. Because God is, back to me saying God is patient. If you don't understand God's patience or accept God's patience, I would have been in the same cycle over and over and over again. That I'd be like, well, I just got over this lesson. Why is it so hard that I'm so tempted to do this again? It's because you didn't sit long enough with him. That he delivered you from something, but you didn't sit in the stillness of God to understand. Because I realized that he was patient enough to wait on me, but I started to realize I wasn't patient with God in return. That I was always like, all right, God, I got over this hurdle. What's next? And I think that that's how I lived my life prior. Like, I made an accomplishment. All right, what's next? And I had to relearn how to deal with my emotions. I had to relearn to, if God removes something from me, truly sitting in how that made me feel. Like, God is a God that will allow you to feel. And I was so used to being numb and depressed that I did not feel anything. I didn't know what happiness felt like, because I was always having like it was almost like I was waiting on the shoe to fall. That it was like when God delivered me from something or a time, I was just almost like, all right, so yeah, what you about to do for me next? Versus just sitting and like, let me just sit in this. Let me feel that this heartbreak really hurt me before I'm rushing on to figure out what's next in life. Like, sit in this. Because if you don't, what you'll fail to realize is, once again, you bombarding your way through a situation that God never meant to happen. And then you back at square one, dealing with the same thing, and it's just disguised itself in a different way. And you're like, God, why do I keep repeating these cycles? Because you didn't sit long enough in the season that I delivered you from. You didn't sit long enough in those emotions that I had lined up for you. I was giving you the space. I was protecting you. I was making sure that no hurt, harm, and danger was coming your way. I was putting a fortress around you that the enemy couldn't find you when he wanted to. I was giving you the space to just sit here and feel how you feel. I was giving you the space to be happy and not be provoked by the enemy. Like, I was giving you the space, and I was so caught up in how I used to do things. Once again, my spirit and my flesh they at each other. And I really had to be like, flesh, you gotta die. Like, the way you think you know it all, the way you live in his life and thinking that, all of these things are happening, like, you really have to just like consecrate yourself. And I think sometimes we like, oh, it's easier said than done. I think when you're tired, it's easy. When your way never worked, like my way never worked, it's almost like I'm willing to try you. Like, this is the best place, the safest place I could be. Like, if all else fails, I could just blame you. But I serve a God who won't fail, so me blaming him is really not true. And after I really came to the realization of like, okay, I can't fight God no more, I fully surrendered. And that was probably in 2021. I was like I said, it was like, God, I'm going to do it your way. I don't have another way. I'm going to do it your way, and I'm going to surrender. And in that year, it was like God was showing me who he was, but then turning a mirror around on me to be like, so is this you as well? Because it tells us we should be like Christ. It also tells us in the Bible that God created us in his likeness and his image. So it was like God would show me who he was and then turn a mirror on me and be like, now is this you? And that's how it was like God was showing me who I was, and I had no idea that he was showing me who I was. It was almost like I gave you the question of who are you, what's your purpose, and now I need you to respond back to me. This was a time where that question, I was able to like put pen to paper. I was able to, if someone was to ask me, it was no longer my accolades, but it was more so like, man, I really am a kind person. It was more so like your purpose is to go out and teach people how to live this thing called life through the lens of God. Like, you're bigger than your accomplishment. You're bigger than what you could do for people. You're bigger than what you can give out to the world. Like, you're bigger than, like, you know, it just allowed me to see myself through different situations. And I can't pinpoint it to say like, oh, I discovered, you know, I think a lot of times when people try to figure out who they are, they put themselves in different boxes and different categories, and they kind of mirroring, like they see other people like, oh, I could do that. And then you wonder when they do that, that they don't have any success in it because they're doing something that God never created them to do. They're doing something or trying something that God never gave them the idea or the dream or the vision to do. And I'm so grateful for God that it was like, before I platform you, before I give you this opportunity to speak on a mic or whatever I may have you do, whatever that may be, I'm going to show you who you are first. Because when we truly know who we are, no one, when I say no one, can then tell you anything. It's almost like if you don't know who you are, you'll fall for anything. And I challenge anyone who's like, hey, I think I know who I am. You're bigger than a mother. If you're someone who have children, if you're married, you're bigger than being a wife or a husband. You're bigger than just being a dad. Like, there's a purpose that God has created you for, and he's the only one that can give you that answer. But it starts off with you looking yourself in the mirror. It starts off with you identifying who God is. And if you're in the seat in your life, you're like, I know who God is, but I haven't truly figured out who I am. I challenge you to go back to knowing who God is and truly having those hard conversations with God. Like, over that time period, God gave me the space to feel. And like I said, this is just episode 1. We have so much to uncover and to go deeper into, but I truly challenge you to go back and say, like, God, who am I? Because what we find out is, I don't stop asking myself that question. That's one thing I have noticed about myself over the years is I don't stop asking myself that question. What I don't do anymore is go looking in the face of man or the face of things to give me that answer. I go to the Creator, because each year I evolve to be somebody else. Each year, God gives me new opportunities that I present myself, and I have to ask God, like, who am I? Who did you call me to? That I don't just want an opportunity if it doesn't align with who you called me to be. And I don't want to be a wife if it doesn't align out with who you called me to be. Like, I don't want to be a mother if it doesn't align out who you called me to be. And when I do become those things, who am I in you? I don't want to make an idol out of the things that you've given me because I don't know who I am, that I hold on to them like this and not like this because they never truly belong to me. And that's just one thing about this podcast, that I'm grateful that God allowed me to know who I am, that I'm not sitting in front of a camera and I'm just taking y'all through the wind. Like, these are things that I've experienced, these stories that I'm telling, and these moments and these opportunities that God has given me, or topics that God has given me to speak on, are not things that I'm not either living or I have lived. But it takes someone to truly know themselves to be able to say, stand in this earth, stand in this world with so many options. Like, we have so many options. You need to know what options God have called you for. Because I'm in a place in my life, I don't want to waste my time on options that never belong to me or opportunities that never belong to me, because it doesn't line up with the will of God. It doesn't line up with who God has called me to be and who he has told me to be. So knowing yourself is probably the best gift that God could give you, because you can't be thrown to the wind easily. You can't be misused easily. You can't be taken advantage of easily, because you know who you are. And I think about so many people who don't know who they are. I just sometimes go back to think about when I didn't know who I was and how I presented myself to the world. And I presented myself so fake. I presented myself so lost, but I thought I was doing a good job of hiding it. And it makes me think of how many people I encountered that believed that version of me and didn't even get the best version of me. Like that version of me was trash. And to know that this version that you're getting today is a version of wholeness, is a version of I went from broken, but I'm better. It's a version of me that I didn't even know was possible. So I'm super excited. I'm going to close this episode, episode 1 of Who Are You? Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Put your thoughts in the comments. I hope that this sets you free. I hope that you got something out of this podcast that you didn't even expect to get from me. And I cannot wait. I am just so excited about our next couple episodes. We're going to have guests at some point in time, and we're just going to kind of dive deeper into God and deeper into what God is doing through us. These experiences that I'm showing you or telling you are either experiences that I'm currently living or that I've lived. And I'm just super excited. So thank you for coming to the Broken But Better podcast. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. You can follow me on all social media platforms, Mariah on Purpose. Make sure you hit up the comments. Like, I want to talk to you in the comments. Yeah. Thank you so much. I love y'all. Bye.